on this computer. Good morning, dear friends. We're pivoting to joyous, happy events. Today is the 7th day of Kislev, the 11th of November. It is Thursday, and we are gathered here on an alternate account to study the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Presently, Maseches Shabbas, chapter 9, Pei Ches. That's 88. We're talking all about Matan Torah. Let me just text Professor Stern in case he didn't see it. Bear with me, folks. We are studying Maseches Shabbos. We're talking all about Matan Torah, and previously it was all about calculating the exact date of the Rosh Chodesh, and we've moved on from that. Baruch Hashem. Hold on, I just got to take a selfie. Let my brother know that his son is safe. Okay, good. We got a little Mendel, my nephew over here, joining us for today's discussion until Rabbi Schallenberg finishes his other rabbinic duties that he's doing. Again, we're talking about the Matan Torah, and we just read a segment talking about the association or the connection between the Torah, the Jewish people, and the number 3. And we just finished reading a segment of the Talmud that says the Torah was a 3-part Torah to a 3-part nation, to a person who embodies the number 3 in a variety of ways in the 3rd day of separation, in the 3rd month. And that was the teaching we saw yesterday. Although it was introduced to make a very specific point, we took the detour to talk about some of the more agadic messages within that teaching. Now let's share the screen and continue our study session. I think this is the right way to do it. Do you see the screen?
Yes.
All right. And again, as I mentioned, thank you all for your indulgence as we make finding today's place perhaps just a little bit more confusing. My understanding, this might be an equivalent of Schar Halicha in a virtual universe. So thank you for making your way here. And so the statement, the Torah was given on the 3rd day. Kiman, who does that assertion reflect? Kirabanan, that's reflective of the Rabbanan's viewpoint, as we explained yesterday, because separation needed to be 2 days, and the 3rd day was the day of Matan Torah, and that supports the opinion, seemingly, or actually it does support the perspective of the Rabbanan, seeming to challenge the perspective of Rabbi Yossi. For some reason, the Gemara here doesn't give any pushback on the interpretation of Rabbi Yossi, although I suppose one could say simply 3 complete days. I guess there's a way to go, or maybe you'll just say that this agadic teaching isn't consistent with the words of Rabbi Yossi. Just looking in the commentaries here. Well, I guess depending on how you interpret the number 3, it could very possibly be consistent with Rabbi Yossi. But anyways, we'll leave it at that for this moment. Let us jump into more agadic teachings all about Matan Torah. Some of these are no doubt quite well known to you because they are some of the pillars of all Shavuos sermons and study sessions. But here we'll get to study it with a special flavor, and knowing that you're studying this as a part of the entire Talmud that we are currently studying and journeying through. The verse states, during the revelation of Har Sinai, Moshe, let's open up the Chumash. Vayhi v'yom hashlishi, right? We just mentioned this on the 3rd day. Mendel, leave my Gemara, please. Thank you. V'yosah boiker, in the morning. This is talking about the morning of the giving of the Torah. Vayehi kolotu brakim. There was loud sound, lightning. Anan kaved alahar, heavy, thick, dense clouds on the mountain. Kol shofar chazak me'od, a very strong sound of the shofar. Vayecherad ha'am asher b'machane, and the people in the camp were very fearful, or they trembled. Moshe led the nation towards Hashem out of the camp, Vayis yatzvu b'sachtit ha-har. Vayit yatzvu, they stood. B'tachtit, literally underneath the mountain, ha-har. Of course, not literally, it means they stood at the foot of the mountain. For full effect, one more pasuk. The mountain was all in smoke. Hashem descended and revealed himself on the mountain with the effect, alongside the effects of fire. And so there was smoke like that of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled. The sound of the shofar was very strong. Moshe spoke, Elokim Ya'anenu B'kol, and Hashem responds. And then, of course, in just a moment, here we have some more of the story and then the 10 Commandments. This is something that we read, but the Gemara is going to focus on the words, they stood under the mountain. Did they literally stand under that mountain? Well, the Sefaria commentary that we use says no, but our Gemara is going to beg to differ. Amar Rav Avdimi bar Chama bar Chasa. Rav Avdimi asserts, Milamed Shekafa HaKadosh Baruch Hu Aleim Esahar Kigis. Here we learn from the words of the Torah, we can infer that Hashem picked up the mountain and held it over their head, ki gigis, like a barrel. Rashi, tachtis ahar, tachas hahar mamash. They literally stood under the mountain. In its literal reading as opposed to its conceptual reading. What is a gigis? So we usually translate it, let's see here. Here, Rabbi Steinel says like a tub. A kuba shematilin b'shechar. A vessel that typically holds beer. You want a cracker, Mendel? Folks, give me 1 second. My co-presenter has a request. Got to honor our co-presenter. Okay. So you're good? All right. And so the mountain is held over their head. What happened next? Hashem then tells them, V'amar lahem, im atem mekablim haTorah mutav. If you take the Torah, fantastic. V'im lav, but if you refuse, sham tehei kevuratchem. Hashem will just drop the mountain down, and the Jewish people will forever lie under Mount Sinai. This is the teaching of Rav Avdimi bar Chama bar Chasa. Before we go further, can someone explain to me what this sounds like? Does this sound like a consensual dynamic?
Rabbi, exactly. So this takes away from Nasiv and Nishma. People could have done it just because they were afraid.
So Rebero says this is a little disturbing, because it means that maybe there was not full-fledged acceptance of the Torah. If a person is told Torah or game over, well, then they don't really have much of a choice. Rebero, is that approximately what you're understanding?
Right.
And that's a problem. Rebero, it's a good question. It's such a profound question that Tosfot asks it, and the Gemara infers this. So let's first read the rest of the Gemara to see how the Gemara deals with it, and then we'll take a sneak peek into Tosfos and see if he gives us anything to chew on. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. So Rav Acha bar Yaakov responds to this teaching that the mountain was on their head and they were basically threatened, accept the Torah or die. Mikan Moda Rabba Leoraita. This creates a significant, I'll say, disclaimer. This puts a significant asterisk on the Torah. What do I mean? Rashi explains. Let's say a Jew is compelled in a tribunal. He's judged by Hashem, and Hashem will say, why didn't you observe the Torah? Yesh lahem Teshuvah shekablu ha'ba'ones. We can say, listen, Hashem, there was coercion. It wasn't a full-hearted acceptance, and therefore this should not be enforced. Similar to in Jewish law, there are certain scenarios where a person may make an oath or sign a contract but if they simultaneously present a disclaimer stating that this was done under coercion and not with a full and accepting heart, there are scenarios where that agreement can be nullified. And so Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says this presents a challenge to the full force of the relationship between man and God based on the covenant of Mount Sinai. So what are we trying to do? We're just trying to challenge this narrative of Har Sinai. So no, Amar Rava adds, Afal Pi Kain, although you are right, there was a little bit of a wrinkle in the fullness of the relationship between man and God, or the Jewish people and God. Hadar Kabluha Bimei Achashverosh. Many years later, in the Purim story, the Jewish people wholeheartedly accepted the Torah, eliminating whatever wrinkle, whatever uncertainty was present by the coercive nature of Matan Torah. How do we see this? Tichsiv, at the very end of the Megillah, it states, Kimu v'kiblu haYehudim. The Jewish people observed and fully accepted the Torah, and the Gemara says, Kimu masha kiblu kfar. The Jewish people reactivated and renewed their vows. They accepted a Torah relationship with Hashem. Rashi, me'avat hanes shenasa lahem. Not because they were threatened. They could have very well rejected it. But out of gratitude to Hashem for the miracle they experienced, they embraced Hashem with love. This is a very important segment in the Talmud, both for what the understanding of the story of Matan Torah. It's an important commentary into the Megillah. Hasidic thought deals extensively with this question. Did Hashem really threaten literally to kill the Jewish people? And so I have seen in Hasidic writings, I've personally seen this in the teachings of the Rebbe, the Lubavitch Rebbe, but I believe this comes from earlier generations and iterations of Hasidic thought on this subject, where Hasidic thought says Hashem wasn't threatening the Jewish people with death. Hashem exposed them to such profound love and to such profound revelation that in the moment, there were no rational two choices. Hashem revealed the Jewish people to the truth of existence, to the truth of Hashem, and in the moment where you're fully aware and conscious and have a prophetic kind of perspective on creation, Hashem as creator, as the only true entity, the Jewish people temporarily had their free choice manipulated by virtue of exposure to Hashem's greatness and love. So were they threatened with death? According to this teaching, no, but they were exposed to such intensity that they really did not have a choice to say yes or no.
Rabbi.
Yes, Rebbe.
Could we ask Dr. Menachem at the Hebrew, couldn't we just avoid the question that it could be read that they were at the foot of the mountain?
Indeed. That's what that is how the translators like to look at it. But I suppose we could have written misaviv lahar, right? Around the mountain. This word tachtit, although of course we could. Oh, you see, the one day that I didn't post the link, hang on. I gotta say. Yes, Mendel, you want more? Here you go, more. Okay. Bear with me a second. I want to send this gentleman our link. Ellie, temporarily just for today, a new link. Use the link I just WhatsApped you. Looking forward to having you on.
Did you send him the password?
I sent him the full link. If you click on the link, you have no problem. But if you enter the link, if you enter the numbers, then you have to also enter the password. Yes, Mendel, yummy. Ellie, welcome on board. Great to have you on. Thank you.
I had to step away for a minute or two, but can I ask a question? So
yes,
I don't
go
know
ahead.
if it was raised, if it was brought up. So here, it's kafalem hakegigit, he forced them in a way, And then we have Naseh v'nishma, Naseh before v'nishma. They were even willing to do it before they even heard it. So how do the two work against each other?
All right. So Reb Menachem, do we have you for another minute or two?
Yes.
Okay. So Reb Menachem and Reb Beryl asked variations of the same question. A good question. I would tell you it's a good question even without what I'm going to say next. But usually when we and Tosfot come to the same question, that's usually a sign that our thinking is on target. So let's take a fast jump to Tosfos here. Kafa aleim har kegigis. Tosfos says, hold on a second. Hold on. Hey, I thought the Jewish people accepted the Torah wholeheartedly. So why are you now saying that there's something wrong with the sincerity and the fullness of Jewish acceptance? How can this Gemara coincide? And by the way, you cannot have a Gemara arguing with the Torah, right? The Torah has greater authority. So if the Torah tells us explicitly, they said Nasa v'nishma, they wholeheartedly accepted the Torah, well, then a Gemara can't come and argue with the Chumash, right? Which is kind of what it sounds like. And so Tosfos says, no. Shema, you choizrim. It's possible that the Jewish people may have panicked and flipped out. Although initially they accepted the Torah, why would they panic and flip out? There was a very dramatic and traumatic experience where they had a sense of revelation. Their souls left their bodies. And so although initially when Moshe said, hey guys, I got a great offer for you. You got the Torah, it's for free. All you got to do is be connected to Hashem and observe the mitzvahs. They said, that sounds fantastic. We want to have a relationship with the creator of heaven and earth. And all of a sudden they went on the ride. You ever went to an amusement park and you're with your kids or whatever, and it sounds fun, and the kids say, hey, come on a ride, it'll be great, we'll bond. You get onto that roller coaster, and the moment you come to the edge where it has that first dip, you're like, no way, I'm out of here. And so the Jewish people in abstract may have accepted the Torah, says Tosfos, but now they're staring over the ledge, over the big dip on the roller coaster. They're having second thoughts possibly. The Amar Barakam. So basically that's Tosfos' answer. Tosfos says they did wholeheartedly accept it, but now they're in the moment, they're in the drama, and they're asked again, are you sure you want to go into this? And the mount's on fire, their souls are being knocked around like a ping, like a tennis ball, and they could have reasonably backed out. And maybe the threat of accept this or it's game over may have compelled them to stay the course.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Perhaps it's a stereotype, but I see this analogous to a Haredi shidduch. Not necessarily a Haredi, to a lot of shidduchim, that there's real commitment there based on the hope and expectation that, of course, this is the right thing. And then when you mention Purim, hopefully it was the right thing. And down later on, whatever we call commitment, love, or whatever is there, but it's very different from what was there previously. Do you see that analogy?
Doctor, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. I think what you're saying is in societies where there's an arranged marriage,
right?
There's a lot of societies, less today, but once upon a time. So a lot of times the initial marriage says, oh, they're compatible on paper. They had a few meetings and they like each other. Or maybe even if someone dates for a long time and they think they truly really know each other very well. But in marriage, inevitably we uncover and discover sides of the spouse that are not possible to be shared in a dating marriage. Even in a secular society where all steps of intimate life are shared, there's still a distinction between when there's a commitment to marriage. And so what the doctor, I believe, is saying is that it's plausible for there to be a commitment on a superficial level. But then when you get into the fullness of marriage, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the wonderful, well, then there may be a moment of reconsideration, or alternatively, as the doctor's saying, you have that Purim moment where the couple who maybe didn't have the full experience of a relationship prior to marriage discover that it's wonderful, and then there could be a wholehearted acceptance based on a richer and deeper understanding. Is that what you're saying?
But I'm not talking about a superficial level, the commitment. The initial commitment to Hashem or to the Torah is felt to be a full commitment, but based on not being aware exactly when Nasev and Nishma, not being really aware of the details, the particulars, the day-to-day requirements. So that's how I see it going down the line, as well as what you said.
So doctor, you're saying the mashal could work two ways, because you might have a Purim, but you might also have a Purim where they say we're out. So
Right.
okay,
That's correct.
Rabbi,
I think that's a good mashal. Reb Beryl, bevakasha.
Rabbi, it's quite disturbing because I could look at this and in effect it takes away from Nasev and Nishma, because if you're threatened with the mountain coming down, NASA, stop the mountain. We'll worry about what you got to say later.
That's exactly what we're saying.
I'm not happy. I'm not happy.
By the way, I'm thinking maybe to market our shir, I think if we share a picture of me holding my nephew, maybe the shir will become more popular on YouTube. What do you think?
But Rebel, yeah, we have to realize this is just a drash. It's not what's written with Nasev Nishma is in the Torah. Then a Rav comes and he has a drasha, a homily. But in essence, it was Nasev Nishma. Is the beginning and it. You want to expand on it and make another story?
So yeah, so Dr. Menachem, I think what you're saying is it's possible that those who don't embrace this teaching would say that there was a simple, straightforward Nasev Nishma. But accepting this as a meaningful teaching about something about Matan Torah, so we can say that there was a facet that yet needed to be achieved in the rich and wholeness of the marriage. And the Gemara itself is saying that by Purim, the Jewish people took the relationship with Hashem to the next level.
If you remember yesterday, I was upset that they had to bring in all these extraneous sayings here too. Why bring this in? Why do we have to all of a sudden? We have not 70 Shema in the Torah. It's great. We accepted it before we even heard it. Why bring in a story, whether made up or not? Why bring it in? Why?
You're asking why it's introduced in the Gemara, or why it's introduced into the corpus of Jewish tradition, period?
Why is it introduced into the Gemara? Because once it's introduced into the Gemara, it's got authority.
Because the Gemara, the short answer, you're asking a good question, but the short answer is the Gemara is a rough transcript of the style of dialogue in the yeshiva, in the academy, in the Talmudic academy.
Not everything that's said has to be written down.
What?
Not everything that's said has to be written down.
Hold on. So the Gemara takes the stance that this is important to be written down. The question is, where is it written? And the answer is, if it's going to be written in the Talmud, it's going to be written in the segment of the Talmud that discusses Matan Torah. And one of the primary Talmudic sources for all the different stuff about Matan Torah is what we're currently studying. Now, Rabbi Nachem, you're disturbed by the complexity that the story introduces to the relationship between the Jewish people and Hashem, and the added texture and tension that it adds to a more simple understanding of the perusal of the verses in Chumash and Parshas Yisro and in Mishpatim and in Veschanan. But ultimately, the Gemara is not afraid of adding richness, complexity, or texture, even if it could temporarily throw us off or
Let me go a step further. I'll tell you what really disturbs me. What disturbs me is when I read this story, I personally say, it's a story. I don't believe it.
Which story?
Oh,
okay.
It gets me to the point where I say, hey, listen, I don't even
Menachem, you're embracing the Hasid. I think you're embracing the Hasidic explanation that explains that it was more of an overwhelming sensory overload of spiritual connection and closeness to Hashem. It's like the moment that you're showering your kid with presents, there's a better odds than usual that they might also go along with a nominal request that you make. So you're not really, you're not really giving them a choice. You say, hey, you call your son and say, or your daughter or your child or grandson and say, hey, here are the keys to your car. Here's the deed to your apartment. Do you mind sweeping up, or, you mind cleaning up this little mess over here? Are you really giving them a choice? And so that's what we're saying. That's what we're saying happened over here. The Jewish people were so overwhelmed with the deep closeness that they're experiencing that they didn't have. They were in an intense moment, and so they weren't making level-headed experience. Whereas in the Purim story, there was less spiritual fireworks, but there was full-fledged gratitude and a more sober moment in contemplation to re-accept and recommit to Torah. I guess that's Rebbe Nachum probably how.
Rabbi.
Yes, Rebbe Beryl.
Bernie, this one's for you. Maybe
Okay.
what the Torah is trying to tell us, that this is necessary because we're still human beings. So it's nishazoy gefährlich if part of the reason you're following is that the threat of punishment, etc., which we can go into forever.
Yeah. I thought it was Nasa Nishma was supposed to be Torah B'Ksav, and the mountain over was because they accept the Torah Shabbal Peh.
I'm sorry, I missed the last.
Yeah, I think the Nasa Nishma was they were accepting the Torah B'Ksav, but the Torah Shabbal Peh they were hesitant, and that was what the mountain was over their heads for.
So Rabbi Menachem Mendel is adding that there's additional commentary, which maybe we'll see in due course, which say that the Torah, the acceptance of a relationship with God had multiple phases or multiple facets. And so it's plausible that Nasa v'Nishma was, yes, we'd love to have a relationship. It's like there was a letter of intent. We'd love to do this deal. And then you get the contract and it's so crazy. Do you still accept it? And so I think Rabbi Nachman, I think that's what you're saying, right? So there was a letter of intent, there was an expressed interest. Hashem says, do you want to get into this? And the Jew says, this sounds wonderful. Now they're about to get the Torah, they're about to have this sensory overload, they're about to get all these different restrictions, they're gonna have to change their lifestyle, throw out their pots and pans, never eat a cheeseburger again. And so you still want it? And maybe what happened was, metaphorically, the lawyer said, you already signed the contract. If you back out, there's big penalties. And they said, okay, we're going to go into it. But then by Purim, maybe they were given an opportunity to, so to speak, back out. And they said, we still want the deal. And so that represented a deepened connection, a deepened relationship for Hashem. If my business metaphors are off, I apologize. It's not my space. But Tosfos says something along those lines. Tosfos says that maybe, although we have other places in the Torah where the Jewish people made reaffirmed commitments to Hashem, for example, the famous ceremony at Har Grizim and Har Evel, where they reaccepted certain parts of the Torah, and the Gemara says elsewhere that they accepted the Torah. So Tosfos says, well, maybe there's a difference between agreeing not to do Avodah Zarah and agreeing to the minutiae and the intricacy of Torah mitzvahs. So maybe there was a general agreement to not worship other gods, but on Purim, there was an acceptance for the full richness. The Kiblu, they're willing to accept the Torah and its in the Jewish tradition and all of its details. Hold on. Mark, here, this is what you said. Nearly, Kihem Kiblu Torah Shabbat. Initially, they accepted the written Torah. They're willing to have a superficial acceptance of the basic text, but they weren't necessarily. But the fact that the Torah Shabbal Peh tells us that the Torah Shabbat is like a computer, it's like a chip with extensive additional details and facets. And so when they said Nasav in Ishma, they said, we accept to follow that which is written explicitly. And then Hashem further, or Moshe Rabbeinu further facilitated the acceptance of all of the details of Torah Shabbal Peh, all of the added specific Jewish tradition. For example, Mark, my mashal was perfect. In the written Torah, it doesn't say you're not allowed to have a cheeseburger. But in the oral Torah, it does. So maybe the Jewish people initially said, okay, we won't cook a kid in its mother's milk. That's not a common dish. Yeshiva never once tried to serve us kid alone, let alone in milk. And all of a sudden, they discovered it means a cheeseburger and pizza with pepperoni on it and whatever other common culinary basics. Okay, I don't know if you could use the word culinary and pepperoni and pizza in the same word, but you get the point. And so, Reb Mark, your pshat is expressed here in the Ben Yoyada. And actually, the word gigis, wine, barrel, wine is something that's savored at a smaller particle and a smaller amount than other food which you just consume to be full. And so it represents the richness, the complexity, and the detail, the heightened detail that are added in the Torah. She Baal Peh. Well, there you have a few perspectives. I am fairly certain that we still have some questions or some residual hesitance to accept it, but I hope at the very least we appreciate the richness of this Agadic teaching and what it adds to the dynamic relationship that exists between the Jewish people and Hashem. Just to add one more detail, Kimu v'Kibla Yehudim describes how the Jewish people likely could have gotten away with abandoning Yiddishkeit, but they did not do so because of their devotion, commitment, and reaffirmed acceptance of the Torah with all of its details. Shall we proceed with in the Gemara? Get a few more. All right. Amar Chizkiah is going to further analyze. And again, we're now in an Agadic section that's going to share with us a number of different traditions from different rabbis of the Talmud about Matan Torah, about Revelation, and such related topics. Amar Chizkiah. What is the meaning of a verse in Tehillim that describes Matan Torah? Mishamayim hishmata din. From heaven, Hashem projected forth so that judgment should be heard, or sentence should be heard. Eretz Yara Vishakata, earth became fearful and silent. Rashi tells us, Mishamayim Mishmata Din, from heaven Hashem gave forth the Torah initially, and there was fear and silence. Gemara asks, Im Yara Lama Shakata, if the world is afraid, why the silence? The Im Shakata, and if there's silence, Lama Yira. I don't actually understand this question. I've seen it many, many times. Let's see. Ella, but here's how to understand it. I guess here's what we're saying. If the Torah was given forth, if the Torah's presentation to the world engenders confidence, then there should be no fear. And if it engenders fear, there would be no confidence. Shakata doesn't just mean silence. It means a certain security. As the Torah is being presented to the world, initially, the universe, planet Earth, the whole existence was full of fear and eventually silence. Let's see why. Lama Yara, why was there fear? Kedei Reish Lakish. This is the teaching of Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish taught. Listen carefully, we're going to get to the point. In the book of Genesis, in Parshas Bereishis, it says there was evening, there was morning, Yom Hashishi, the sixth day. It should not have said Yom Hashishi, it should have said Yom Shishi. Hey Yisrael Olamali, why Yom Hashishi? From here we understand that Hashem made a condition. And Hashem told the world, creation, if the Jewish people accept the Torah, the universe can continue to exist. But if the Jewish people fail to accept the Torah, well, then the whole point of creation becomes voided, it becomes without purpose. And animachsir eschem l'soyhu v'vayu. And Hashem says he'll press the reset button. Rabbi Menachem, I'm not expecting you to love this either, but let's take a look at Rashi and we'll discuss. Yara, what was the fear? Rashi explains, Shema lo yikablu. Hashem wants to present the Torah. And maybe the Jewish people won't accept it. And the universe will lose its stability. It'll become, Hashem will press the off button. You ever had a smartphone and it was acting all nutty and you just hit the soft reset and you shut your phone down and you try to start it over again? Well, if your phone can't make any phone calls, if your phone can't do its purpose, shut it down and see if you can get it to restart. Maybe it'll work better next time. And if you ever went to the Apple store and your phone is really acting up and they do what's called a hard reset, they totally wipe your phone. Well, if your phone isn't calling and you can't send text messages and you cannot get onto your Gemara Zoom share, well, then there's no point in having this little piece of, I don't know, plastic and glass and metal or whatever. It's not the best thing to knock in a nail, and it's, there's better thing, so what's the point? And so Hashem says the point of the universe is that the Torah should be accepted. And if it's not going to be, if the phone is going to act all nutty, well, then we're just going to shut it all down. Rashi, Yom HaShishi, that's essentially what the Gemara is saying. So the fear was maybe they won't accept the Torah. Once the Jewish people said, Nasa v'nishma, and once the Jewish people took the next steps to accepting the Torah, the world now could take a deep sigh of relief, because it's gonna persist. It's gonna continue. The world's gonna continue. Rashi. What does the hey have to do with anything? Hashishi, mashma, hashishi hamiyuchad. It infers that there was some very special six. Hamiyuchad b'makam acher, that's known for being special. What was the six that was known for being special? Huvav b'sivan shenasnu b'yat Torah. It's the 6th of Sivan. So although I don't believe this teaching is being presented implicitly to challenge the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, but if you'll notice here, we've got another comment, at least in Rashi. Hashishi is talking about the 6th of Sivan. So this teaching certainly would embrace the Rabbanan, the Chachamim that say that Shavuos, Matan Torah happened on the 6th day of creation. So just to recap what this teaching was, another separate teaching, but also about the uncertainty and the prospect of the Torah being rejected. The world was fearful, then calm. Until the Jewish people accepted the Torah, the world was on shpilkis. The world was on edge. The world didn't know if it's gonna survive. When the Jewish people accepted the Torah, no more shpilkis, no more uncertainty, no more anxiety. The world was able to take a deep sigh of relief and know that the world's going to ultimately achieve its primary goal, which is to be full of Torah values and to be a place where eventually Mashiach will come.
I thought that there is no Vav Sivan.
Hold on, I'm sorry, it's my problem, but if you speak up, because my sound is a little schwach.
Okay, I thought that Shavuos is not connect specifically Vav Sivan, but rather 49 days of counting.
Yes.
So here, they specify Vav Sivan when you say Ashishi.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's not that you're saying anything wrong. It's just that I'm having problems hearing. My sound.
He's saying that you taught yesterday, it's not on a specific date, but on.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
you caught me. I was speaking. You're right. Really, it's not so much Shavuos, because Shavuos could have been any day. But Matan Torah, there's a question: was it 6 or 7? And this Gemara is asserting that the original year happened on the 6th day. You're correct. I misspoke. When I said Shavuos, I even caught myself. I said, no one's going to notice. But Baruch Hashem, doctor, you caught me. I'm happy you did. Thank you for that.
Rabbi?
Yes, sir. Yes, doctor.
I think when you say the world was afraid, it seems that Hashem could have been the one who was afraid the way you describe it, because how did they know if they didn't take it that there'd be no reason for the world and the world would be destroyed? I mean, where does that come from?
You're asking, does the world have an independent personality to be worried? So I think it's metaphoric of the fact that I believe it's a metaphor. We're saying until it was accepted, they just as well could have not accepted the Torah.
Yeah. Okay, because I actually go back to my analogy with the shidduch and my favorite word, kavana. I think it has to do when you say na'aseh v'nishma and I say na'aseh v'nishma, I'm not sure we always mean the same thing. Okay, so maybe that enters into it here.
So, doctor, I'm sorry, just to help your muscle, you're saying when a couple says "I do," that's like the na'aseh v'nishma. What do they really mean? What exactly are they signing up for?
Okay, so I'm saying here when Am Yisrael, when everybody was there, and they said yes, we will follow, and then they whether it was out of fear or not out of fear, but wherever the commitment came from, the commitment isn't the same when you say I will follow, I will do. So I just it's a little confusing that they had to really believe that if they didn't do it, that terrible things would happen. The world would be, there'd be no future for mankind.
I don't know if it would be terrible, because the way Jewish thought imagines creation is it's kind of like a projector projecting an image. You shut off the projector, there's no pain felt by the people on the image. It just ceases to exist. And so the concept is not that Hashem is going to bring terrible devastation on humanity or the universe, but the point is the same. It's pretty devastating for us to imagine, for people that exist to imagine non-existence. But anyways, I think let's take it more metaphoric, as there's a great degree of stability and calm that exists in existence, because it's on the road towards meeting its purpose for creation. So again, I would say this is meant to be primarily metaphorically tying the purpose of creation with the Torah. That's really the punchline. One line, this teaching tells us that the purpose of existence is for Torah. Failure for Torah to exist in the universe is like the purpose of the mission statement is not being met. That's really the punchline, to my knowledge. And I know maybe someone's listening to this recording now or down the line, and they'll be disappointed that we're allowing it to be metaphoric, but I think that's the message that's being conveyed. Reb Beryl, go ahead, please.
Rabbi, I think for me, what's going on in the background is the door that Mekabel Torah, it's not exactly the greatest generation ever. And I think that's what's clouding, we know the history, what happened after. So maybe these threats and all these things sort of allude to it.
You're saying these were people that were used to tough love and tough language, and they needed to hear something that spoke to them.
They weren't perfect.
Yeah.
Not only that, what Burrow said, a few days later, you had Chet HaEged.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Etc. They never made it to Israel. The whole door died out.
Yeah. But it's funny, because there are other teachings that say that they were actually very enlightened people. We talk about the door; they were called a dor dayah, a generation of insight. But it might actually go two ways. On one hand, they came from Egypt; they were very primitive, and but after 40 years of studying the Torah and being led by Moshe Rabbeinu, if you survived, meaning if you weren't part of the spies and you weren't part of the Korach and you weren't part of the Eruv, well, then you may have been a highly enlightened person. So I guess we could explore the intricacy and the subtlety of what it means to be a high caliber crew versus a question of, anyways, let's squeeze in this next and final segment for today. I'm sorry, Menachem, you're muted, but if you're telling us something, we'd love to hear your voice.
Okay, now it's an aside, but what you just said as far as the door being enlightened, or really because there were slaves, there were not. I'm sure you never read Spinoza, but that's exactly where he's going with that.
Yes, I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with.
Yeah, so I'm not going into what he said.
Well, as I said yesterday, just because Christianity likes the number 3, that doesn't mean that Jews need to erase the number 3 from our counting system. So just because a notion, Spinoza, until he went where he went, he was also a student of, so I don't think we have to edit everything we say just because someone that I disagree with or I'm not comfortable embracing express a similar sentiment. The Jewish people were slaves, and they did develop a greater sophistication and greater control and independence throughout their time by Mount Sinai in the desert. But shikayach for sharing.
Rabbi, we have a Chabad teaching. Mitzrayim is inside you. Got to get rid of the Mitzrayim in you.
Exactly. So really, all the point of this Gemara, besides for a Torah and teaching us about Matan Torah, it's for us to appreciate the privilege for a Jew or for a human being to have their life aligned with godly values and purpose for creation. And that's the message the Gemara is trying to convey to us. Darash Rav Simai, another famous Talmudic passage about Matan Torah. Listen carefully. Bisha Shiktimo Yisrael Nasal Nishma. The moment when the Jewish people told Hashem, yes, we're in, yes, I do, we accept the Torah, and they said it in a way. First Nasa, first acceptance to adhere. And then Nishma, Ba'u Shishim Riboy Shamalachi Ashares. 600 1,000 ministering angels approached. And every Jew was provided with 2 crowns. Were these pieces of metal? Were all the Jewish people wearing crowns on their heads? Well, let's see. Echad keneged nasa, the echad keneged nishma. One of those crowns were for the goodness of them accepting the Torah to do, and one for the acceptance of nishma, of listening and studying. So all the Jewish people were adorned with crowns. Kivan shechatu Yisrael. Then the Jewish people sinned. How did they sin? The golden calf. Yardu meya ve'esrim riboy malachim. Double the number of angels, right? We had 60,000, and now we have 120,000. Malachi Chabola.
1,200,000.
I'm sorry?
1,200,000.
No. Oh, yeah, is it 1,200,000? You're right. Double 600,000, correct. 1.2 million angels came down, devastating, destructive angels. Uperkum, and they ripped off, they stole, they took off the crowns. Shenemar, as the verse states, Vayisnatzlu b'nei Yisrael es ed yom har chayrev, the Jewish people were stripped of their ornaments on Mount Har Chayrev, which is Har Sinai. Let's take a look at Rashi. What is going on over here? Are these crowns physical crowns? So I don't think Rashi is saying that. Miziv Hashchina. They were rays of light, of enlightenment, of connection, of Kedusha. Now, why was there initially 600,000 and then 1.2? So Rashi says, Kol achad v'echad natal kaser. We'll have to look in the commentary soon. Why one angel can give 2 crowns, but to take away, you need one angel per item. They lost out these items. They lost out this kedusha. Rashi says the same thing. You know how Moshe, we describe how Moshe's face was still radiant and he had to cover his face with a veil? Well, this kind of radiance was initially presented to all the Jewish people. Tosfos makes my point, or I should say, I made Tosfos' point. Yardu kufchaf riba. Why do we need 1.2 million angels to take away and only 600,000 to give? So first of all, where do we get the number 1.2? It says vayisnatzlu, plural 2 times. Anyway, so here's the question. Usually we say that Hashem is more gracious in goodness than in punishment. And so it sounds like more angels to do bad than good is Hashem being more exuberant and more invested in the bad than the good. In truth, read carefully. The greatness is in how Hashem presents goodness. A good angel has the capacity to give 2 crowns, but a malach habala is not have as much power. They can only take away 1 crown, and that's why they needed to be double crowns. So depending on how you look at it, it could either be greater strength, greater energy in good or bad, and that's the point that Tosfos makes, and that's Tosfos' explanation why there needs to be double the number of trouble angels. Rebero, go ahead.
Yeah, in the real world, if I have a crown, you come with a crown, I'll help you put it on. You want to take it away, I'm going to resist.
You're saying the Jewish, you're saying the Jewish people were probably more cooperative in receiving the crowns than in relinquishing them. Okay. Rebero, the Zokstapis. We should add that. We really should create a commentary that's born out of our Chachmas over here. And so we'll jot that down, not on the list of questions, but on the list of Chachma that is generated by this group. Doctor?
We could call it Motzei Shabbos Live.
So let's take a look at the Ben Yoyada who asks our question. Yesh lahakshei. So question. To give a crown, you need 1 for 2 crowns. Nearly. To give the crowns, we had angels from the right. The chol yamin, the right represents greater strength. 1 angel was able to schlep around 2 crowns. But to take them away, the left angels, the bad angels, they're weaker angels. Din. They came from Sitra the Smaller, so they weren't as strong. Alternatively, take a look. This is Kabbalistic or metaphoric, but take a look. It's nice. Malach HaToiv, a good angel, Gam Smol Shelo Chesed. A good person, even their cranky day, even on a day that they're woke up on the left side of the bed. That's not what he says, but that's what I'm reading. An angel, even their left is also good. So therefore, the crowns were kedusha. They come from the right, but an angel of goodness could carry the crown in his right hand, his left hand. Again, of course, this is all metaphoric because angels don't have bodies. But a bad angel can only use his left hand to do bad. So they only had one hand to grab one angel. Again, this is metaphorically, but conceptually, the bad angels were only operating with a single hand, whereas the good angels, the right hand, the left hand, were all part of good. Alternatively, and this is actually what I was originally thinking, you know that an angel can only be sent to do a single mission. To deliver the crowns, although there were two, it's a single objective. Consider like one, because there's no problem between them. But to take them back, the crowns were damaged, or one of the crowns were damaged, and therefore they had different messages, and they were not a single entity, and therefore you needed two separate angels. Anyways, and then it gets even more Kabbalistic. Long story short, the Jewish people were granted this great kedusha, these great spiritual crowns, rays of light, maybe akin to Moshe, so super duper powerful that an angel's hands were totally full. An angel, whatever an angel is, its hands are entirely full with two crowns, and a bad angel could only wrap its arms around a single crown. So we're talking about a big dose of kedusha, a big dose of energy, and that was what was gifted to the Jewish people. Tragically, whatever this enlightenment and blessing that the Jewish people received, a metaphoric, metaphysical kedusha kind of crown, it was taken from them after the sin of the golden calf. My dear friends, thank you for your time, for your patience, for your schar halicha, for joining us today at a different link. With Hashem's help, tomorrow we'll resume at our regular link, at our regular scheduled time. Hopefully, Gesundheit and Freilichkeit. Thank you all for being here today. And I want to thank my co-presenter, Mendel Kudan, for joining me for the first half of today's discussion. Folks, have a wonderful day. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good Shabbos. I won't be able to make it tomorrow, Rabbi. Hopefully,
Right, no
y'all-
problem. Hopefully, all is well and will be well in your
you.
primary residence.
Right?
Take care.
Take care.